Drew with Moto Adventure again. Kind of want to do a follow-up on the last video. So I asked everybody, what's going on with motorcycling. I got a whole lot of people that said, safety is a concern. I'd like to list everybody's name, but I mean, there were just so many comments that were saying like, I'd get a motorcycle, but I'm worried about safety. Or a lot of people are saying, hey, they've got friends and family that they are interested, but they're just worried that it's dangerous. So I wanted to delve into how dangerous are motorcycles, and why does everybody have that perception? People are like, well, of course motorcycles are dangerous, Drew. I mean, you don't have the protection that you have in a car. Weren't you in an accident last week? And, well, as a matter of fact, that is true. I unfortunately took a ride without the motorcycle last week, but as you can see, I'm back on the bike again today, so I think it's something that we need to talk about. So every year, the National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration issues a report about the basic traffic accidents of last year. Usually takes us about 2 years to get the data from the NHTSA. But this is the numbers that we have from 2016. There were 220 million licensed drivers in the United States. There were 288 million registered vehicles. With all those drivers on the road, there were roughly 38,000 fatalities and about 3.1 million injured. Of those 38,000 fatalities, about 25,000 of those were passenger vehicles. The rest of those were made up by semi-drivers. About 5,000 of those were motorcycle fatalities. People are going to throw around statistics that say that you're X amount of percent more likely to be killed on a motorcycle than you are in a car. And I think in the end, people don't realize that for the most part, motorcycles are like boats. They're recreational vehicles and people don't ride them as often. And I think that's a recurring theme that you're going to run into, that people ride motorcycles, but they don't necessarily do a lot of training. They may or may not have on gear. They may only ride 1,000 miles a year. So it's a new experience for them every time. So it's hard for me to say that you can directly compare the danger of being in a car to being in a motorcycle when a lot of people don't apply themselves to master the skill of riding a motorcycle, but they drive their car every day, which in itself is good and bad. Some interesting statistics that people don't realize is that about 27% of all the fatalities on motorcycles are people who didn't even have a valid motorcycle endorsement. So that was about 1,400 people that shouldn't have been on the road in the first place. Along with the number of unlicensed riders, about 1,200 or so motorcyclists, that's 25% of all the ones killed on the roadway, had a blood alcohol level that was above the legal limit. Now, we don't know where those two overlap, and I have a feeling that that's the case, but that's still a large portion of the motorcycle fatality population, I hate to use that word, that didn't belong on the road, and yet people come up with this assumption that motorcycles are dangerous. Something else that not everybody realizes that based on the 2016 data, only 55% of motorcycle fatalities involved another vehicle. A lot of people are quick to start making comments about, well, I'm afraid to ride the motorcycle because all the people texting and driving, and I don't want to take that away from them, but in reality, that's still 45% of all motorcycle fatalities that only involved the rider. Similar to my accident, there was no car involved, it was simply rider mistake. And that's something I think people need to take into account. So we talk about how dangerous the environment is, and there's no doubt that the other cars and people aren't paying attention, and then the road conditions, which is what got me, are bad things. But in reality, a lot of that can be trained. And in my case, it was a matter of conditions. I should have known better than to ride under the conditions and should have known better than to take that route, but I did it anyway because I'm stubborn, and I paid the price for that. But that's a piece of it that I don't think that when we look at the statistics and we look at the culture that we go in deep enough and look at and say, hey, are these people wearing helmets? Are they wearing gear? Are they getting training? Why aren't people getting training? Why aren't people looking at getting gear? And so how do we change the culture? So that's the question. I think it's fair to ask, are motorcycles dangerous? And I think it's fair to say that motorcycles aren't necessarily dangerous, they're unforgiving. Are people dangerous? Are certain personalities dangerous? And I think most importantly, the question is, if we have a culture that says motorcycles are dangerous, can we change that culture? And if we can, what can we do to advertise? There's no question that's one of the reasons why I did a write-up on my little, my off last week, was so that, hey, this is what happens, this is the gear I have, this gear gave itself up to save me, and I made a dumb decision. So keep that stuff in mind, and then it can be a lot safer than you think it is. So what do you think? Are motorcycles dangerous? And I get that's kind of a given, but most importantly, should we change the perception that motorcycles are dangerous? Is it possible motorcycles aren't as dangerous as people think? And if we should change that perception, how should we go about doing that? Thanks, guys. I'll see you later.